think it goes without saying that a lot of people love The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and rightfully so. It's a gorgeous game. There's something to do at almost every location of the map. You can point your camera almost anywhere and get a breathtaking landscape. Go anywhere, do anything, see it all. But is it actually a Zelda game? Sure, you can look and see some long-standing franchise regulars, Link, Zelda, the Master Sword, kind of Ganon. The list can go on and on, but there's a lot missing. There are some people out there who say Breath of the Wild is not a Zelda game. I'm going to look further into this topic in this video and see if we can fix any problems that arise. I'm someone who's very much on the fence on this debate. I absolutely love Breath of the Wild, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. But on the other hand, I love the entire Legend of Zelda series. I've grown up playing the games, and I love all of the aspects that are in the old ones. I would be disappointed if the only way we could see the classic Zelda formula going forward would be in remakes. But I would also hate to lose the open world, open air, go anywhere and do anything of Breath of the Wild. To try to appease everyone, I'm going to look into what Nintendo can do to make the Breath of the Wild sequel, quote, feel more like a Zelda game. I'm going to try to keep this as organized as I possibly can. So I'm going to organize the video into 5 parts that I feel will be integral inclusions to restore the old Zelda formula. These sections will be items, music, dungeons, story, and feedback. There are a lot of collectibles in Breath of the Wild. Weapons, armor, food, but where are the actual items? We see the return of boomerangs and bows in Breath of the Wild, but they're no longer cool, one-of-a-kind collectibles like they were in classic Zelda games. They break and you can throw them away with no consequence. Where are all the cool classic items? I'm kind of building my own Breath of the Wild sequel with my video series so far, so I'm going to reference back to my Rebuild HYRULE idea for this section, which if you haven't seen that, it will be linked in the description. Have classic items return as a reward for rebuilding major areas in the game. For an example, rebuilding the Akala Citadel can reward you with the hookshot, which would make climbing faster and less stamina draining. You could aim like a quarter of the way up a mountain or a building, hook into it, and start climbing from there with full stamina. Musical items such as the Ocarina or Goddess Harp can return as well. It would be cool to have the Ocarina to summon a horse, or change the time of day, or summon a storm from anywhere on the map, or use the Goddess Harp to teleport to an area similar to the Silent Realm trials to clear up large areas of Malice. Returning items can fit into the clothing category as well, such as the Goron and Zora tunics, to help you resist high temperatures and to breathe underwater, which could be rewards from restoring Goron mines and Zora domain areas. The Zora tunic would obviously differ from Zora armor, which helps you swim faster. Old boots can make a return as well, such as the Pegasus boots to make Link sprint faster for a short amount of time, or the Iron boots, which sink Link underwater, giving a use to the Zora tunic in the game. I've also mentioned getting rid of shrines, which I'll elaborate further on later. But with no shrines, why not lock some heart pieces and stamina vessels behind overworld puzzles, or have them really hidden in the overworld to reward people exploring really obscure areas? The possibilities could be limitless to what could be done with returning items, how to obtain them, what they do, and how they would fit into the world. I for one hope we get a lot of classic collectibles. Breath of the Wild took a new approach with the soundtrack to have a more ambient feeling compared to the epic tracks in previous games. I feel like the approach they took was great to highlight the emptiness and solidarity of Hyrule. I do feel this approach will be great at the start of the sequel, but as Hyrule continues getting rebuilt, the soundtrack can become more prevalent by adding more instruments in and less downtime. Near the end of the game, the soundtrack would be complete and always a part of gameplay. This may seem like a lot, maybe even too much, but a way to avoid the music becoming repetitive would be to have each region have its own soundtrack, Heading from the Great Plateau to the Faron Woods, it would transition between 2 different songs. Each area could also have somewhere around 30 minutes to an hour of music. This is why I said it could be too much. It could be a smart soundtrack that remembers where you last heard it, having a jump-in point every 30 seconds to a minute or so in the song itself. You load into the area, and the track starts at around the point you left off on. Maybe that's too much, but hey, we can dream, right? Shrines are one of the new ideas added into Breath of the Wild. In addition to shrines, we also received the Divine Beasts. This is what we got instead of traditional dungeons, and while I think they were cool in their own ways, nothing can replace a Zelda dungeon in a Zelda game. I think shrines should disappear completely. It was fun completing all 120 shrines the first few times I played Breath of the Wild, but it's become more and more of a chore with each subsequent playthrough. As I have previously elaborated, I think rebuilding Hyrule and setting up warp points that way would be a good substitute for shrines, and having items, heart pieces, and stamina vessels as rewards elsewhere would render shrines completely useless. The 4 Divine Beasts have been reclaimed and did their part in taking down Calamity Ganon, so we don't need them at all in the sequel. So what's left? The return of normal dungeons. I think that the perfect time for them to appear would be at the beginning of the game, when we encounter Ganondorf's withered body, much like how Sheikah Towers arose when we activated the first one on the Great Plateau. Whether new passages underground appear much like with the mines I mentioned in my weapons video, which lead you to dungeons, or new ones in the overworld, I think it's the most obvious and best choice going forward with Zelda. Personally, I'd prefer overworld dungeons. Give me a fire dungeon in the Death Mountain crater I can only access with the Goron tunic, or a water temple in Lake Hylia, only accessible with the Zora tunic and iron boots. Give me the option to enter them whenever I want, but only completable once I have those items required. The mistakes of the first game cannot be repeated in this game with dungeons. We need unique bosses for each one. They need to be discernible from each other at a single glance. Give me time to explore and not just finding and unlocking terminals. I want sprawling, thought-inducing dungeons, and more than 4. The story was Breath of the Wild's weakest point, because it was completely optional once you're off the Great Plateau. I need reasons to care about why I'm going on this journey. Zelda is saved. Hyrule is reclaimed. Right now, all we have to go off of is the return of Ganondorf, and I want a deep, in-depth reason of why he's back. I'm not really going to go in depth like I have with the other sections. I have no idea or even current thoughts of what the story could be. I just know I want one, and we all really want one. For the feedback section, I asked some of my friends on my Discord who love the Legend of Zelda series but weren't the biggest fans of Breath of the Wild why they weren't fans of the game, and what they would change. I already had ideas for the script written down, so I'm sorry if anything gets repeated, but it just reinforces that these are things that Zelda fans really want. Von Roski says, "The biggest thing is a sense of puzzle solving, especially in dungeons. The shrines were a neat idea, but they were so short and lame that they didn't feel like you really did anything. As you also mentioned, the lack of specific weapons, especially things like the hookshot and iron/wing, which I assume means hover boots, felt like a massive oversight as well. They allowed access to new areas around the map and in other dungeons, giving me a reason to check out new places and try new things, as well as retread old areas looking for items and upgrades. The lack of music was really disappointing too. While I don't want the Zelda theme blasting for the entire 30 plus hours, the music lends to a feeling of epicness while you're out exploring, or danger when you're in a new place. Why no traditional dungeons? The 4 beasts were just slightly bigger versions of the shrines, with puzzles that lead to underwhelming, quote, boss fights, which also weren't nearly as inventive or interesting as previous entries. Remember Bongo Bongo, Volvagia, Twin Rova? They not only asked you to use your newly found weapons, but tasked you with learning new movements and fighting strategies. They had interesting stories backing them up through the dungeons you felt threatened going in, and they helped you learn new tactics to use later. Also, the final Ganon fight is a joke. There's nothing interesting or dynamic about it. It's just an all but stationary enemy. The rain is a major issue. While I like dynamic weather, it rains way too much. Not only does that usually ruin any chance of climbing that area, but all metal attracts lightning, which can kill you. Also, I can't skip time or make a fire, the two things I really need to do at that time. Weapons breaking sucks. If you happen to find something good, it's either use it and lose it, or save it and have it. There's no in between. A repair feature, a combo system to upgrade them, something. It's so bad. Korok seeds. Dumb. Just dumb. The rewards could be handed out through dungeons or side missions. The full 900 reward is not only useless, but makes half the seeds themselves useless. They need to go or become some kind of currency. Use them to cook with, creating super good recipes. Recharge the Master Sword. What is the story outside of the memories? What is the story of the memories? The severe lack of a story here makes the game forgettable at best, and not a single bit of it is required or important. Everyone is dead. What is your drive to even fight Ganon? Where's the post-apocalypse we were told happened? Why is Hyrule still so pretty and looking exactly as it did 100 years ago? It's just so lazy and bland. It's like Nintendo gave us an awesome world to explore, and no reason to do it. My friend Her says, "When I think of The Legend of Zelda, I think of the 8 dungeons. The feeling you get, wondering what that new weapon will be in the dungeon, and how it's going to be used to usually defeat the boss of the dungeon. That's where I feel Breath of the Wild fell short. Everyone praises its open world, which it does well, but in return, it didn't do the rest of the series justice in that regard. If you step back and really look at what Breath of the Wild has, it's a whole bunch of bite-sized shrines, which are cool, but grow old after a while in my opinion. It has 4 bigger, quote, dungeons, which literally have the same boss reskinned, found this super lazy, and a final boss that was actually really cool. Breath of the Wild is something I cannot go back to like the other Zeldas because of its non-structure. I personally have to be in the mood for open world games, where Zelda was its own genre. All I hope for Breath of the Wild 2 is more structure like the past titles, but I highly doubt it's going in that direction. If not, then maybe some unique memorable bosses with personalities instead of Lightning Ganon, Fire Ganon, etc. There's even a running gag in my channel where I told my opinion Breath of the Wild a while ago, but it's how I feel. Quote, a good game, but not a good Zelda game. He made it into merch. My friend Reverse says, the biggest things for me are the lack of progressive equipment and gear, and the lack of themed dungeons. These were my favorite parts about Zelda. And it's not that I think Breath of the Wild is a terrible game in a vacuum, but it is what it is, at the expense of, I feel, cashing in most of what made Zelda, Zelda. To elaborate on the first point, starting out with all the Sheikah Slate abilities at the beginning of the game made the beginning of the game fun, but it also made opening chests kinda boring. The best I could hope for was just a weapon that will break anyway, if I use it. When I compare that to the thrill of, say, finding the hookshot, it doesn't even compare to me. The biggest change up Breath of the Wild throws is giving me new gear, but I kinda learned climbing takes up so much of the game that wearing something other than climbing gear was usually just incorrect. It hindered my ability to play. To elaborate on the second point, I always appreciated the dungeon puzzle solving in the series. The Divine Beasts were my favorite part of Breath of the Wild, but the fact there's only 4, and they share a tile set, and that all 120 shrines share a tile set, seems like such a huge waste to me. I'm used to varied dungeons. I love going from forest theme to water theme to fire theme, etc. It always felt very samey to me in Breath of the Wild. Lastly, I usually love rain in video games. It's calming and beautiful, but the rain was just frustrating Breath of the Wild. It resulted in me spending a ton of time with the controller on the desk waiting for it to stop, because I knew I had to climb the wall in front of me, and I wasn't allowed to. This is a smaller thing than the other two, but was frustrating enough to leave a lasting impression. Even between myself and my 3 friends that helped me with their Breath of the Wild opinions, we had some differing opinions, and some similar opinions as well, such as rain sucks. What would you guys do to make the Breath of the Wild sequel more like classic Zelda games? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/wowshane, and everyone who helped me out. Their links will be in the descriptions. Twitch.tv/VonRoski, Twitch.tv/her, and Twitch.tv/Reverse2. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.